You know, when we think about artificial intelligence today, it's really easy to picture this incredibly smart oracle.
Right, like an all-knowing digital brain just waiting for a question.
Exactly. But if you really look at it, that oracle is totally tracked. It's stuck behind a screen. You ask it a question, it processes these massive chunks of the internet and it spits back a brilliant answer.
But for all that raw processing power, it is essentially paralyzed.
Yeah, it's basically a highly intelligent, very well-read brain sitting in a glass jar.
A brain that could, describe the fluid dynamics and physics of riding a bicycle to you in 10 different languages.
But it couldn't actually pedal a bike down the street if its life depended on it.
No, not at all. Doesn't have a body.
Well, today we're looking at how we're finally breaking that glass. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we are taking a massive stack of the latest research for you. We've got advanced robotics surveys, industry reports from the SAE 2026 World Congress, tech deep dives on the new Pi Zero model, and various robotics blogs.
It's a really comprehensive look at the state of the art right now.
It is. And our mission today is to help you understand how artificial intelligence is moving out of the cloud and into physical bodies. It's about letting this intelligence loose in our messy, chaotic world to interact with physical objects and what that actually means for our future.
Because it represents a huge fundamental shift. We're
Yeah.
moving from an intelligence that just observes and sorts data to one that actively participates in physical reality.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you follow AI at all, you already know that the large language models running our chatbots are brilliant at text, but they completely lack any real physical context.
Right, they operate on static data sets. They learn offline in server farms.
But embodied AI, which is an intelligence that lives inside a robot arm or a delivery drone or even a self-driving car, it has to learn by doing.
Because the real world doesn't come neatly packaged in a text file for you to read.
It really doesn't.
Think about how a toddler figures out the world. A 2-year-old doesn't sit down and read the Wikipedia entry on fluid dynamics or gravity, right?
No, they just make a mess.
Exactly. They grab a rubber ball, chuck it at the floor, and they observe that it bounces. Then they grab an egg, throw it with the exact same force, and hit.
And it shatters everywhere.
Right. They learn the properties of physical matter through direct consequence. They learn by interacting.
Compare that to a text-based AI. Like ChatGPT has an encyclopedic knowledge of gravity. It will confidently spit out the exact phrase, glass is fragile.
But it has never gripped a glass.
Exactly. It has never felt the smooth surface of a cup start to slip through its fingers because it, didn't apply enough force. It knows the vocabulary, but it completely lacks the physical intuition.
And that intuition takes serious trial and error. An embodied agent has to break a few glasses in a lab before it can generalize a physical rule.
Like realizing that thin walls plus transparency usually means be gentle.
Yes, it needs to soften its mechanical grip. And this directly ties into Moravec's paradox, which is the famous concept in robotics.
Oh, right. The idea that the hard stuff is easy and the easy stuff is hard. Essentially, yeah. It points out that high-level reasoning, like playing grandmaster chess, is computationally cheap and easy for an AI.
But low-level sensory motor skills, like simply reaching out, grabbing the physical chess piece, and moving it without knocking over the rest of the board, are phenomenally difficult to engineer.
Yeah.
So traditional AI is like someone who has memorized every single textbook on swimming. They know the biomechanics, the fluid dynamics, the optimal breathing techniques.
Yeah.
But embodied AI is actually throwing them into the pool.
To actually feel the water and the current.
Right.
What's fascinating here is a quote from the philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty. He framed this beautifully decades ago when he said, "I am not in my body, I am my body."
Wow, that really fits.
It does.
Mm.
Because for these new robotic agents, their physical form isn't just a vehicle carrying a computer around. The physical body is an integral part of their cognition. The sensors and the motors are literally the medium through which they think. Okay, so if the body is part of the brain, how does a robot actually process its environment? We know how a language model predicts the next word in a sentence, but how does a robot think in real time?
Well, looking through the research, this boils down to a continuous 3-step cycle called the sensory-motor loop.
And this isn't some slow, thoughtful calculation, right?
No, not at all. This loop is firing constantly, anywhere from 10 to 50 times every single second.
That is incredibly fast.
That speed is non-negotiable if you want fluid movement. And this loop has 3 distinct stages, starting with stage 1, which is perception. The robot has to take in its world.
Right, through cameras, LiDAR, and tactile sensors. The data mentions the Sharp-A-Wave robotic hand here.
Oh yeah, that hardware is wild. That device packs over 1,000 microscopic touch sensors into a single fingertip just to handle cutaneous sensing.
Cutaneous meaning like skin-like touch.
Exactly. It allows the robot to feel minute changes in texture or instantly detect the microvibrations of an object beginning to slip, so it can adjust its grip in milliseconds.
But seeing and feeling the external world is only half of perception, right? The robot also has to perceive itself.
Yes, which is vital.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I was reading about this concept of proprioception in the sources. Can you explain that in human terms? Like how you can close your eyes and still touch your nose because your brain knows where your arm is in space.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. If you close your eyes, you don't lose track of your limbs because your brain maps your muscles and joints.
So how do we give a robot that same internal awareness?
A robot needs a continuous stream of data from its own internal encoders. These encoders tell its central processor the exact angle of its elbow joint or the precise millimeter spread of its mechanical fingers.
Because it can't just rely on pointing an external camera at his own arm to figure out what it's doing.
Right, that would be way too slow and prone to occlusion. It needs that internal math.
Okay, so stage one is perception. The robot sees the coffee cup, feels the ceramic texture, and knows the exact posture of its own arm in 3D space. So how does it decide what to do next?
That brings us to stage two, reasoning. And this is where we are seeing a massive leap forward thanks to vision language action models.
VLA models.
Right. You can think of them as the next evolution of the language models we use today. Systems like RT2 or the new Pi Zero model take all that perception data, the live video feed, the proprioception numbers, and combine it with the text instruction you gave it, like pick up the red cup.
I get how it processes the text, but how do you physically translate a digital thought into a physical movement? I mean, it can't just spit out a text paragraph that says, I am picking up the cup.
No, it doesn't output text. Instead of predicting the next word in a sentence, it predicts action tokens.
Action tokens, okay.
Think of action tokens like sheet music for muscles. When you read sheet music, you aren't reading words. You're reading a highly specific sequence of notes, timing, and intensity.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So the VLA model outputs a dense string of these action tokens.
So it's translating the broad concept of grab into a specific chord of electrical signals.
Exactly. Physical Intelligence's Pi Zero model manages this massive data load beautifully. It uses a pre-trained vision language model as its backbone.
Meaning it already understands what a cup is from reading the internet.
Right. It knows what a cup is or what a folded shirt looks like. But then it attaches that broad knowledge to a specialized action expert module. And this lets the neural network output continuous fluid motor controls for really dexterous tasks.
Which naturally drives stage three, execution.
Exactly. Execution or control.
This is where the robot's hardware decodes those action tokens into actual electrical commands. It sends specific torques and velocities to the physical motors in the arm.
Right. So it perceives, it reasons, it executes 50 times a second.
It's a staggering engineering achievement, but it creates a massive logistical nightmare.
It really does.
Because we established that an embodied AI has to learn by doing. It has to run that loop millions of times to get good at a single task. And doing that in the real physical world is painfully slow.
And incredibly expensive and, frankly, dangerous.
Right. You don't want a 500-pound industrial robot arm learning how to pour a cup of coffee through trial and error in a crowded office space.
No, it's going to shatter mugs, burn out its own motors, and probably punch a hole in the wall.
So how do engineers solve this without destroying the lab?
They put the robots in the matrix.
Literally a virtual training ground.
Yeah, it's a process called sim-to-real transfer. Engineers build physically accurate virtual environments, these highly detailed digital twins of kitchens, warehouses, or hospitals.
And they let the AI practice in there.
Exactly. They let it run its sensory motor loop for millions of simulated hours before it ever touches a real mechanical joint.
I noticed in the research there is a major divide in how these simulators are built. Teams seem to be arguing over which virtual environment is best.
Yeah, the two big ones are Habitat and AI2TR.
Right, so Habitat, which is developed by Meta AI, is built for pure blinding speed. The data says it can run upwards of 10,000 steps a second.
Which makes it phenomenal for teaching a robot spatial navigation. If you want a robot to learn the layout of a house and how to move from the front door to the kitchen without hitting a wall, Habitat will teach it incredibly fast.
But the trade-off for that speed is that it strips out almost all complex, rigid body physics.
Right. In habitat, objects are basically static obstacles. You can't really pick them up, they don't have realistic weight, and they certainly don't break.
And then AI to Theor is the complete opposite. It is deeply focused on physics. It runs much slower, maybe 60 to 200 steps a second.
But every object has assigned mass and friction. You can open a virtual microwave door or drop a glass and watch it shatter into pieces.
Wait, if Habitat can do 10,000 steps a second and AI to Thor only does 200? I mean, why use AI to Thor at all? Why not just train everything lightning fast?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, a robotic policy that doesn't understand the physical consequences of its actions is a massive liability.
Because it's operating in the real world.
Exactly. You cannot shortcut physics. If a team relies solely on the high speed of habitat, they might train a robot that perfectly navigates down a hallway. It speeds into the kitchen without a hitch.
That's great so far.
But then you ask it to pick up a coffee mug. Because it never learned manipulation dynamics, because it never experienced mass or friction in that speed-optimized environment, it grabs the mug and applies maximum force, instantly crushing it.
Oh man, so it doesn't know what fragile means physically, only textually.
Right. If you are building a general-purpose robot, teams need both. They need the sheer volume of data, from habitat to master movement, but they absolutely need the slow, rigorous, computationally heavy physics of AI to Thor to master delicate physical interaction.
And even then, a virtual simulation is still too perfect, right? The developers have to use a technique called domain randomization to keep the robot from just memorizing the video game.
Yes, that is the trick to make robots robust. They intentionally make the simulator chaotic.
How chaotic are we talking?
Well, they will randomize the virtual lighting by plus or minus 50%, alter the friction of the floor, change the mass of objects on the fly, or even tweak the simulated gravity,
Just to mess with it.
basically. If you train a robot under perfect, unchanging virtual conditions, the resulting neural network becomes incredibly brittle.
So the moment it gets deployed into the real world, an array of actual sunlight hits its camera lens, it completely freezes up.
Exactly. By subjecting it to controlled chaos in the simulator, the AI learns to adapt to the chaos of the real world. It figures out that while the lighting or the weight of a cup might fluctuate, the core mechanics of the task remain consistent.
Okay, so let's say you've trained your AI perfectly in this chaotic, physics-heavy simulator. It's an absolute master at picking up virtual coffee mugs.
Okay.
You download that brain into a physical robot arm in your lab, and it works flawlessly. But here's a massive curveball I didn't expect from the data. What happens if you take that exact same perfectly trained brain and load it into a completely different robot?
The performance falls off a cliff. Oh, yeah. The industry refers to this as the embodiment gap. The policy was mathematically optimized for a specific physical structure. When that structure changes, the AI is effectively uncoordinated and blind.
Hardware really is hard. The data gives a stark example of this. Imagine you have a grasping policy trained on a Frankopanda robot arm.
Right, which uses a standard two-fingered parallel jaw gripper.
Exactly. If you take that perfectly functional software and load it into a UR5 robot arm that uses a suction cup gripper, it completely fails. The action space is different, the achievable joint angles are different, even the camera mounts are entirely different.
The neural network is expecting the physical world to look and respond in a very precise way based on the geometry of its previous body.
So, what does this all mean to ground this for you listening? It's like learning to drive your whole life in a tiny automatic hatchback. You become a master at it.
Oh.
And then, suddenly, you are dropped into the driver's seat of an 18-wheel manual semi-truck.
That's a great way to put it.
You know the rules of the road, you know what a stop sign is, but the body you are controlling is completely foreign.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. And to solve this, developers are pivoting to cross-embodiment training. Instead of training an AI model on a single robot's dimensions, they train it on dozens of different robots simultaneously.
Like the OpenX embodiment data set, right? It pools data from 22 completely different robotic platforms.
Yes, or that Pi Zero model we talked about earlier. That one was trained on 7 distinct robot configurations across 68 different tasks.
All at once.
All at once. By forcing the neural network to control a single-arm robot, a dual-arm robot, a mobile-wheeled robot, and a quadruped robot simultaneously, it prevents the AI from overfitting to one specific mechanical body.
It forces the underlying model to learn generalized, universal physical skills.
Exactly. But even with cross-embodiment training, the real world is still full of physical imperfections that a simulator simply cannot predict.
What kind of imperfection?
Well, mechanical slop is a prime example. In a simulator, a gear is mathematically perfect. But in the real world, physical manufacturing has tolerances. A real robot's gearbox might have a tiny bit of backlash, just a little wiggle room in the joint.
And the simulator doesn't know about that wiggle room.
Right. If that specific mechanical slop wasn't explicitly coded into the virtual training ground, the real-world robot might start oscillating wildly, overcorrecting for a tiny error that its virtual twin never experienced. Simulation alone can never fully fix an embodiment mismatch.
And those inevitable physical mismatches fundamentally change the risk profile of this technology.
Absolutely.
I mean, when AI enters the physical world, the cost of failure skyrockets. With digital AI, if a chatbot hallucinates, you just get a bad text response. If an embodied AI hallucinates, it crashes a car or drops a patient or crushes merchandise.
The physical world is unforgiving, and the math on failure rates is actually quite sobering. A robotic policy that achieves a 95% success rate in a tightly controlled laboratory environment will often drop to a 60% success rate the moment it is deployed in a real-world setting.
Just due to messy variables.
Exactly.
And 60% is completely unworkable. Think about the compound probability here. If a task requires 10 distinct sequential steps and the robot is 95% accurate on each individual step, its overall success rate for the full task plummets to roughly 60%.
Right, which for a warehouse robot executing hundreds of cycles a shift means failing roughly 50 times a day. You would have to hire a human worker just to follow the robot around and clean up its physical mistakes.
That defeats the whole purpose. Commercial production environments demand 99.9% reliability.
They do. So to get there, the industry focuses on the 3 A's of embodied AI: autonomy, accuracy, and accountability. To guarantee safety, developers use strict operational design domains, or ODDs.
Basically establishing strict boundaries, like you only operate in this specific warehouse between these exact temperatures.
Right. Bounding the environment drastically reduces the edge cases, which drives up accuracy. But accuracy isn't accountability.
With digital software, if it gets something wrong, I just close the browser tab. But with embodied AI, accuracy without accountability is a literal liability. How do companies actually guarantee safety around humans?
This raises an important question, and the core solution discussed at the SAE 2026 World Congress revolves around deterministic safety overrides.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means you do not rely on the AI's complex neural network to police its own physical safety. Instead, you use decoupled hardware architectures. While the massive VLA model is busy processing tokens, there's an entirely separate hard-coded safety system watching the physical output.
So a rigid hardware-level limiter that stops the robot if the AI makes a bad choice.
Exactly. Real-time deterministic safety systems like physical torque limiters. If the AI suddenly hallucinates and attempts a dangerous physical movement, the torque limiter detects the sudden spike in energy and instantly severs the power.
It just completely overrides the software.
It acts as the ultimate failsafe.
That actually makes me feel infinitely better about sharing a physical space with one of these machines.
Right. Pairing advanced capability with traditional rigid mechanical engineering is really the only way we can ensure safety.
Well, we've covered a massive amount of ground for you today. We started with the oracle in the jar and explored how AI is stepping out of the cloud and into physical bodies.
We mastered the sensor-motor loop.
We survived the chaotic virtual training grounds of Habitat and AI2 Aethor. We talked about overcoming the embodiment gap and how those deterministic failsafes are keeping the physical world secure.
It is genuinely the frontier of modern technology. But before we wrap up, that SAE 2026 white paper left us with one final unmentioned thought for you to ponder regarding human-robot coexistence.
Oh, lay it on us.
As these robots enter our daily lives, they will need to communicate their intent to humans to build trust. Think about how a robot might use standardized visual symbols or intuitive physical movements just to signal, "I'm moving left."
Right, because they don't have natural body language like we do.
Exactly. It makes you wonder, in a few years, will we start redesigning our homes and workplaces not just for human comfort, but to accommodate the sensors and communication styles of the robots living alongside us?
Are we going to adapt our physical world to suit the robots? That is a wild, paradigm-shifting thought.
It's a completely new era of physical coexistence.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep a curious eye on the physical technology stepping out of the screen and into your everyday life. Catch you next time.